Hey everyone, it's Ben Shakini with Give and Grow here with another episode of the Give and Grow podcast. This is our social emotional learning series where we dive deep into conversations around mental health, parenting, teaching, just throwing out any tools, techniques, and perspectives that will be helpful for you guys that are raising young kids, teenagers, or young adults. So today I'm super excited to introduce you guys to Jake Abraham. I met Jake at Randolph Academy in Randolph, New York, when I was doing some speaking. Jake has his master's degree in mental health. He has 5 years of experience in the clinical mental health space, and is currently a school counselor at Randolph Academy, in addition to being a certified personal trainer. So, Jake, how are you doing today, man? Great to have you.
Great, man. I appreciate you having me on, Ben. This is a really exciting experience to just honestly like talk about the work that we do here and spread awareness, touch on things that I know that you do a little bit based on what you told me. So really excited about it.
Awesome, awesome, man. And one thing that I'm really excited about with this specific episode that I mentioned to Jake earlier is that we're going to be really tapping into some ideas around supporting at-risk youth. The Randolph Academy in Randolph, New York, it serves a majority of at-risk youth, I would say, right, Jake?
Yeah, I would say so. We're what you would consider a special designation school. So there's like 8 of us in the state of New York, and what we really do is I would say what we're categorized as behavioral, right? So all of our kids have individualized education plans, and a lot of the kids that we deal with have what would be considered an emotional disability. Emotional disability can mean a lot of different things. From my perspective, I would usually kind of think mental health.
Mhm.
So it's a unique role for me where I get to use my clinical experience in a school setting because, yes, we are working with at-risk youth. Um, so just a little background about Randolph Academy. We also work with a residential program that is on the same campus as us. So
Mhm.
we do have from them a lot of kids that come through us from social services, CPS, things like that. So I would say it's about 50-50, as far as like learning disorders and emotional disorders. But it blends, right? Because it's kind of a combination for us of um, yeah, I guess they're all kind of at risk in a sense, right? All the kids that we work with are at risk for maybe not being able to go to college, find work after school, find a stable environment to go back to when they graduate, things like that. So we do work on a lot of life skills,
Mhm.
and our program is very much geared towards following norms, normative culture, right? We want to create a culture of respect. Um, you know, education is a value here, so we want to make sure that it all ties together. Like we're educating while also nurturing, and it's a balance, that's for sure.
Yeah. So with that group of kids and at school or in just your experience
Hmm.
interacting with everybody at the school, kids specifically, like
Hmm.
where do you kind of start? Where how is how is that approach? Where do you start?
I would say, I mean, you gotta. That's a good question, right? Because I think when I started here, I felt very confident about my background being in mental health. Um, I personally have mostly worked with adults in the past in the mental health setting.
Hmm.
What I wasn't really expecting was, I guess, to answer your question, the amount of patience that you would need to work with children.
Mm,
Um, Mental illness looks much different in children, especially when you're in a school setting and it's affecting education. So, the biggest thing I would say is, patience, understanding, trying to meet kids where they're at,
mhm.
um, because if they're not feeling heard and understood, which is in many cases with these kids that we have, they've never really gotten that.
Mhm.
You almost have to teach them, I'm hearing you and I'm understanding you, and this is what
Right.
it looks like.
Mhm.
Reassuring them many times throughout the process that that what they're doing isn't necessarily wrong, right? But it's maladaptive. It's not necessarily going to be something that's going to help them over the course of their life. So
Right.
if they want to get where they want to get, um, you know, they're going to maybe have to play the game a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is really consider what other people are going through. The groups of people that are here are all at risk, as you mentioned, and there's a lot of interaction that goes haywire, even just between the kids. So the adults, I would say, we really have to prepare ourselves emotionally, take care of ourselves emotionally
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that we can be there for the kids
Yeah.
day in and day out.
I hear a few things in there. The patience and the reassurance thing to
Mhm.
me is like this. It speaks to this idea of taking it slow, right?
Yeah.
Like and being consistent. Even the reassurance of like,
Hmm.
I hear you, I see you. Like that consistency, that slowness, that patience. I think
Hmm.
I can see how that would help to build a relationship and a connection to be able to dive into some more of those. Like, hey, recognize that this person is going through some stuff too.
Yeah.
Some more empathy skills might be able to come a
Hmm.
little bit later after building that connection. And
For
then the
sure.
last piece that you hit on around just taking care of yourselves as the adults
Yeah.
in that space, I could see that being really heavy, just because we are talking to parents and
Hmm.
teachers and other adults that are supporting kids and maybe even potentially some at-risk youth. Like,
Hmm.
what would be some advice or some ideas that you'd like to share around self-care and the importance of that?
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I always think like my if my body's feeling good, if I'm healthy, my mental health is probably going to be much better. So you mentioned earlier, I'm a certified personal trainer. Um, I like to work out. I mean, I like to play sports. I always tell the kids around here, I'm like a dog. If I see a ball flying, I'm gonna go chase after it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and honestly, I think that like you almost have to embrace your childhood self a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, if there is any advice, I'm not an advice giver necessarily, but it would be that, right? You have to really think about what you needed as a kid, when you wanted, your parents to play with you or something, right? And if they weren't able to at the time, how that felt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Same thing here at school. If a kid is struggling to learn a subject, you really got to consider when was it when I was learning the same material and maybe I struggled and what did I need at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So really it goes back to the empathy piece, right? Like you want to take into consideration what the other person's feeling and try to tap into that as much as you can, uh,
Mm-hmm.
while also maintaining that like you're the person that's here to help, right?
Yeah.
Because empathy can be a dangerous thing sometimes, right? You can get too caught up in what's going on with the kid. We see, and I think that's maybe the biggest challenge in our setting is trying not to care so much about the struggles that the
Mm.
kids go through because it's heartbreaking, to be honest with you. Some of the things that we've dealt with that
Right.
kids have gone through. So there's only so much empathy that you can give.
Right.
Um,
It sounds to me in your share like what I'm hearing in that is not like taking the emotional baggage on as your own while still maintaining a high level of like caring about this person and
yeah.
providing support, but not like
Hmm.
allowing that to kind of enter your system, almost creating that
Yeah,
like emotional boundary, if you will, of like,
for
okay,
sure.
I don't need to take this on for myself, but I can see that it's really challenging for them and I can be there for their support. And if I do take
Hmm.
on a lot of this emotional stuff, I'm not going to be able to show up for them in the way that
Absolutely.
they really need, kind of creating some space, but
Hmm.
still witnessing with compassion.
Yeah, I mean, the word balance comes back to me a lot, right? Like, I feel like you're gonna feel it if you're out of balance, right? And your body's gonna tell you. So, for instance, like using the example that I just used with subject matter here at school, is a kid really gonna be able to learn if the teacher or the adult in the room is getting frustrated that the kid can't learn?
Mm,
Um, because you need to connect, right?
right.
But at that point in time, you're basically sharing the frustration with the kid,
Mm-hmm.
right? So not only are they taking on your frustration, but they're feeling the frustration that they feel with themselves
Mm-hmm.
and all the other emotional baggage that they've got going on. So it's almost like you have to assume that you're going in understanding your own emotional baggage and knowing where that line exists and being able to, tap into their emotional baggage just enough to connect and
Mm-hmm.
get them to a place where they feel safe and
Yeah.
heard.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit just about like, I feel like you've hit on some points, but just tying it into that feeling safe and feeling heard, because I feel like those are two big ones. Um,
Yeah, and I would say like with at-risk youth, that's the biggest risk, right? I believe, just in my opinion, a lot of what leads to sort of maladaptive behavior is that not feeling understood, right?
mhm,
Generationally, I think we've seen a change in parents over the last couple generations where we're progressively getting more and more understanding of what kids are going through.
mhm,
um and that's the part of it, right, is like we need to maintain that like we were kids once, and that we maybe needed something, maybe we didn't get it, maybe we did, right? Maybe we
maybe we
didn't get it
did.
from our parents,
Maybe
but
we
maybe
didn't
we
even
got it from a
know.
coach or someone, right?
Hmm.
What was that? I'm
I was
sorry.
just sorry to jump in there. Maybe we didn't even know what we needed at that time, was
Yes,
what was coming to mind for
exactly.
me.
And so that's the thing, right, is like a lot of these kids might not know what they need, and so you have to model that for them.
Hmm.
Model the patience, model the understanding, be gentle with yourself, right? um, because they're hard on themselves. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all kind of hard on ourselves at the end of the day. But when you don't know how hard you are on yourself and what effect that is having on you and others around you, having adults like us around who have that ability to again tap in, relate, sort of connect with you on the hurt, but
Hmm.
show you that like there's a different way.
Right.
There's other ways that we can think about this, actions that we can take.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like feelings do tell you a lot, right?
Hmm.
They tell you if you're out of balance. But if you're um, not able to get back into the balance, that's where the not knowing what you need part comes into play.
Hmm.
Uh, you're probably just going to stay there, and that's where you become more and more at risk.
Mm.
So again, like balance, like within yourself, within your relationship with the kid, it goes a long way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I appreciate you breaking it down in that sort of sense. And I also wanted to acknowledge before we get too far away from you sharing
Mhm.
around like the connecting with yourself as a kid, as
Yeah.
well as like being physically healthy. You
Mhm.
know, those, I feel like those two can sometimes be underrated in a
Mhm.
sense. And actually, you started going down a different path than I thought you were going with the connecting with yourself as a kid, because you were talking about, playing sports and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And then more, the route you kind of took with that idea, that was unexpected for me, was being able to connect with what those kids need. When you were a kid, what were you
Yeah.
needing? What were you
Mhm.
struggling with? And being able to see through their lens. Where
Mhm.
what came to mind for me in being a kid was still continuing to play and have
Yeah.
fun and have that be a
Yep.
healthy way to take care of yourself and
Mhm.
reset, when especially dealing with all the heaviness that goes on in some of these kids' lives. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
I could really see both being really powerful tips, so I wanted to drop that in here.
No, I appreciate that because and if we backtrack just a little bit, I think that's all relative, right? Like
Mm.
that part of empathizing with your younger self and understanding that like we all need that. We all need to be able to play and have fun, and we all need to like lighten up. That I would say that the kids help me with that a lot of the
Right,
time.
right. Yeah, that's beautiful and powerful right there.
Mhm.
And I I'd imagine as well that the kids feel empowered and important when they're able to help us shift into a more playful, less demanding, less performance-based mindset.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's me, man. Like I, I, I try not to identify as like too serious of a person, but I think in my adult life we all get a little too serious. Stress
Mm,
happens, things happen, but really like these kids at heart are playful, right? the amount of energy, I have a 5-year-old at home and a 1-year-old too. So like the amount of energy that children have is like, I admire it. I
Right.
really wish that I still had the capacity to move and run around all day
Hmm.
and then take a rest and act like I'm tired and then get up and still run around and be crazy.
Right.
And I think that that's the thing, right? That's the balance. There's a give and take.
Mm.
They provide for us too, and
Right.
I never shy away from telling the kids what they teach me, because
Hmm.
I think that empowers them to help them understand that like this is not just me trying to tell you what to do.
Right.
I'm not an expert necessarily.
Hmm.
I'm certainly not an expert in your life, in your experience. So
Hmm.
you have to teach me about that.
Yeah.
And if I can connect with that, then I'm better for it too.
Right. That's beautiful, man. I got the
Mhm.
chills talking about that because I could see that being really, really helpful for especially a kid that's like constantly seen as struggling or having a
Mhm.
disorder or like
Yeah.
being sent away from their family or,
Mhm.
like all these different things, behavioral challenges, like to actually be told that you are helping me, you are teaching me lessons
Mhm.
about life that I really value and are helping me out.
Mhm.
Like what a beautiful opportunity to share
Yeah.
that. What a beautiful gift for that kid to hear that.
That's it too. Like gifts. These are gifts, I feel like, right? I didn't necessarily ask for these abilities. I inherited them in some way. I always say like when I got this job, like this was the perfect job for me because I do get to be a kid in some sense still. Like for instance, like I've gotten a lot better at basketball since I've started working here because I'll just go down and shoot hoops with the kids, and like that part of it allows me to connect with them
Mm,
far more than any like intervention I've ever tried with them, right?
right,
They trust me and feel more connected to me when we're shooting hoops and joking around,
right.
as opposed to me bringing them into my office and being like, "Hey, what was the problem today?
Yeah.
Tell me how you're gonna work through it and what you can do next time to make it better." Like kids, that works with adults. I would say like
Mm,
that is helpful for adults, but kids, they're not thinking about that. In fact, I think they get a little like cringe when you bring
right.
that stuff to
Yeah.
their attention. They're like, "No, I don't want to talk about this," you know?
Right, right. And I think it comes back to the piece that you were sharing earlier about meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
They're at the space where they want to joke around and have some fun on the court or on the field or
Mhm.
outside or listening to music or whatever it
Mhm.
is. And if you
Yep,
can meet them where they're at, then that's building the foundation for them to open up about the other stuff.
for
Whether
sure.
how big of like in your experience, how important is the environment that you're connecting with the kids in? You kind of just hinted on it, but
Mhm.
like where have you found the most success and how important is where you're actually holding these conversations and connections?
I think it's got to be a space where both you and the kid feel comfortable, right? Kids, like when I first started working here, I was really excited about the aspect of my job that was teaching social emotional learning, because I was like, man, I get to teach, kind of going back to what I said earlier, like I get to teach the kids some of the stuff that I learned when I was in grad school. And I'd be like, just from my own experience, like I ate it up, right? I loved
Mm.
learning how to be more emotionally healthy and just like certain things that you can do to improve your own well-being. Again, like kids are not like in a classroom when you're standing in front of them and you're just like, hey, this is what you can do. You take deep breaths when you're feeling frustrated. That it's not the same as when they miss a couple shots, couple while we're shooting hoops, right? And
Mm.
you're like, hey, take a deep breath, focus, don't try too hard. And then they make the shot and there's relief right there,
Right.
right? Like you get to see relief in real time when it comes to those things.
Mm.
So not to say, I mean, the classroom is obviously very important. Um, and there's probably plenty of other professionals within my building that would say that that's the place, right? That's the setting where they can connect most with the kids. But
Hmm.
for me, I would say it's outside, um, walking around the school, playing on the playground, out in the yard, throwing a ball, on the court, shooting hoops. Like anything where we're both active.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that to me is my best place to be able to connect to people.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Hmm.
It's like a low pressure kind of situation. It's somewhere
Hmm.
where they're already motivated, whether they're motivated to actually like be good at the sport or just like
Hmm.
they want to be outside because they're not in school and it's
Yeah.
springtime, it's like, okay, meeting them where they want to be and where they're already motivated. Uh, my wife would kill me because she doesn't like this guy as much as I do, but Tony Robbins,
Oh
like
yeah.
he talked
Yep.
about how if you want to impact somebody or influence somebody, you
Hmm.
got to know what already motivates them and influences them,
Right.
right? And then you can meet them there, and then that's going to help. So if it's money, if it's sports, if
Absolutely.
it's whatever, now we're on a
Hmm.
common ground. Now it makes sense to throw in the breathing technique, right? To help
Hmm.
somebody out versus in the classroom, it's like, I'm not motivated to get an A in this class. Why would I listen to this? But then you're
Right.
actually in the situation where it's
Hmm.
like, shoot, I want to do good at this. I need some help. Oh,
Yeah.
try this breathing technique out.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny that what you just said touched on something that I'm trying to think of what it was exactly. Like the aspect of like the pressure or like what they're motivated by, right? Like
Mm,
they feel pressure in the classroom. Um, I guess it's kind of common that everyone wants to succeed in school, but that pressure, and this for me, I'll relate to myself. Like when I was a kid, I would probably feel this pressure more in sports, actually.
mm, mhm,
So um, making it fun for the kids is like a big goal of mine because I think even when it comes to like shooting hoops and throwing a ball and stuff like that, like I don't know if I enjoyed that as much as I wish I would have when I was a kid because I did feel that pressure.
mm,
Those were probably the moments where if somebody told me to take a deep breath, I would be like, I am taking a deep breath, you know?
right.
Um, but like, and I see that with some of these kids. So it's still an environment where I feel like I can connect and relate to them because it's it's a situation that I can relate to. Like, for instance, I had this one kid. We were throwing a football earlier this year, and he kept getting mad at himself because he couldn't like hit me right in the chest when he was throwing the ball
Mm,
to me. And I was like, man, we're just out here throwing. Like, it's supposed to be fun. Like, don't worry about where you're throwing it. Like, I'm gonna pick it back up and I'm gonna throw it to you. Those sorts of things I think are like are really important when you're trying to help a kid not lose their interest. Let's say I don't like
mhm,
to speak in negative terms, but like the pressure that you can feel in certain situations can lead you to not feeling interested anymore.
right.
And if there's no interest anymore, there's no motivation, there's no moving forward. So I think it's the lightheartedness of interest, right? You have to really like care but not care about something to say that you're interested in it, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah,
um
with that lightheartedness, I could see that.
mhm.
And it also sounds to me like with that lightheartedness, once again, it's coming back to that safe space,
Yeah.
right? A safe space specifically in these examples of throwing the football or whatever, shooting a shot, or
Mhm.
even trying something out in the classroom, a safe space to fail,
Right.
right? Like it's okay
Yeah.
if you don't hit me in the hands. It's okay if it goes over
Mhm.
my head. Like we can have fun with it, you know?
Yeah, and like failure is a big teacher, right? Like there's that Michael Jordan quote. I've failed more times in my life than I've succeeded, and that's why I am successful.
Right.
Something along those lines. Don't
Yeah.
quote me on it, but like that, I think is a perfect place for this, right? Because
Mhm.
unfortunately, what happens with a lot of these at-risk children that we get here is they feel like they've failed at life already
Mm, mm,
through no fault of their own, right? You and I as adults can see it from that perspective, but for them, they feel like they failed. And
mm,
so, for whatever reason they were taken from their parents or their parents couldn't take care of them, it was a bad situation, whatever it was, they take the responsibility for that deep deep
mm,
within themselves.
mm,
Um so we got to harness that, right? Like I always talk about the strength that a lot of these kids when they share their stories, it's heartbreaking,
mhm,
right? And like that empathy, I reach that line and I'm like, wow, I can't really empathize with you anymore because I've never experienced something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I stop and I say, but you did. And you're here right now, sitting here with me. And think about the strength that that took for you to get there. And
Mm-hmm.
how can we continue to use that strength going forward,
Mm.
and show you that, like, no matter what you perceive as a failure, it's really just another opportunity to learn.
Mm-hmm. What a powerful reframe,
Mm-hmm.
being able to support them in that sort of way. I think that's a huge thing
Yeah.
to hit on. I'm so happy that they have somebody like you there to support them in that sort of way, to
Mm-hmm.
remind them of that. Cause yeah, I can just see, and I can see the kids that, I got to interact with at your school,
Yeah.
and just like how they've been through some stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
there was this group of a brother and a sister, and they
Mm-hmm.
had lost their mom at like, she was
Yeah.
like 36 years old,
Yep.
and they just started hugging each other, man,
Mm-hmm.
and just were like there for each other in that
Yeah.
moment. And
Mm-hmm.
there's obviously the inner strength that you can have, but there's that strength in the community as well. And I felt that at your guys' school. Like, I
Yeah.
felt like you guys were really there and really knew the kids and cared about them. And like,
Mm-hmm.
how important is that for a kid that's been stripped of their community in a lot of ways,
Right.
right? To have and build new community.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, Ben, like, I think you made an impact on the kids because you came here and you shared with them some of the hard things that you've gone through in your life, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of goes back to what I was saying, like, there's power in that vulnerability, right? When you're vulnerable, you you share the things that you've struggled with, you share the triumphs and how you've overcome them. um, that's what these kids are looking for, right? So they saw themselves in you when you were here and you were sharing those things, and that was probably why those that brother and the sister felt like they wanted to share that with you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the young the boy actually was standing next to me during your presentation, and at the end of it, he goes, he lost his mom to me, and I was like, yeah, and he goes, I lost my mom too.
Mm-hmm.
And and I said, well, you should go tell him. You should go talk to him about it because you guys can connect on that. You guys can
Right.
relate on that. And he walked right over to you right after that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it was like he felt comfortable because he felt like somebody here understands. He never would have known that about you, right? If you didn't share
Mm-hmm.
that difficult experience in your life with a group of kids that you'd never met, right?
Right.
So you demonstrating that you can be vulnerable, but that vulnerability is also a strength,
Mm-hmm.
um, was really important to what we try to do here. And I think a lot of the kids were really touched by that.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, man. And I was so thankful to have that experience,
Mm-hmm.
for so many reasons that we don't necessarily need to get into here. But it was
Yeah.
just it was so special and heartwarming. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess a last question
Mm-hmm.
for you, Jake. Like, well, I guess it's more of a thought in
Yeah.
combination of that is around like the vulnerability side of things,
Mm-hmm.
because we had that conversation after that talk, and I remember you being inspired to be more vulnerable with the
Mm-hmm.
kids, to share your experiences. And obviously it can be challenging to find like what's a little too personal and
Yep.
that I'm not going to share here, that kind of crosses that line of professionalism or
Mm-hmm.
something even potentially being used against me, because I know that was like a fear of one of the staff, is just like, these kids will
Mm-hmm.
turn on you quick because they've just been through it, and they don't,
Yeah.
that's what they've learned, and that's what's they've been modeled, is taking
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability and using it against other people. So like,
Right.
is there anything like in this space of vulnerability, while we're on the topic, that is like encouraging, or yeah, just any other thing that you want to share around
Yeah,
that?
I think it's oh man, like I could probably talk about this one for a long time because when I was in my master's program, I think that one of the biggest things that I struggled with thinking about in practice, I understood the theory of self-disclosure is what we call it in the counseling world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's sharing things to connect, it's to relate to the person that's in front of you. It can be dangerous though, as you mentioned, right? Like that vulnerability, if it's too fresh, if you're still in that vulnerable space,
Mm,
um, and you share that with them, then you're both in that vulnerable space together. And there's not really any strength to maybe power through and get to the other side of it. So
mm,
I always, what I think I've eventually learned in practice was, and especially here, I've learned it because these kids, I mean, that's the difference between adults and kids, right? Like adults might have that little bit of like social filter to be like, okay, I see that you're vulnerable, but I'm not going to like use it against you.
right.
Right. Where like kids don't really hesitate. That's how they like sort of gain some control over you.
Mm,
And again, it's not that they're trying to gain control. They're just trying to gain control over themselves, their own
right.
life.
Creating safety
Um,
in that way.
exactly. And that's it. I think it's like if you see it as an opportunity to create some safety, if it feels safe for you. I
Hmm.
mean, there's been times, I'll be honest with you, where I'm sharing with a kid, like I'm thinking to myself, like, I probably shouldn't be telling this kid this. But when I do, and again, it's nothing like I haven't tried to work through. I mean, this is the other side of it. I think you have to do your own work in order to be able to do that.
That's what I'm hearing in
Yeah.
your thing. Like if you're still processing whatever
Hmm.
this potential trauma was or just challenge was, then
Right.
it can be can kind of bring you both into that space. And then
Hmm.
who's really there holding the space now, because we're both, as you mentioned, in this vulnerable space or in this
Hmm.
lower energetic state or whatever. But if you've done your work and you're able to share from that point, I
Yeah.
think it comes back to that self-care that you
Yep.
identified early on. Once again, it's
For
like,
sure.
hey, you can take care of yourself and then show up in a more powerful way for these kids.
Well, and at the end of the day, I think that's what we want for the kids to learn how to do, right?
Right.
Is to be able to, I mean, as much as the connection and being able to have somebody there for you is important, ultimately, like you are the master of your own destiny, right? Like you have to find your own internal strength that maybe you can learn through somebody else, but you eventually have to tap into it yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I think that like that self-care piece is really really important, and maybe that's part of the vulnerability, like this disclosure that you share with them is like, I got to take care of myself. Like I see a counselor,
Yeah.
I struggle. Me and my wife, or me and my parents have had really tough conversations in the past,
Hmm.
but this is where it led me. And I
Right.
think that that's the thing, is if it's a past tense sort of thing that you feel like maybe you have a decent understanding of, honestly, like sharing it with them can help you too.
Right. For sure.
Mhm.
Man, Jake, I feel like that's the mic drop moment of today, man. I really do appreciate you and all your time, but like what I hear in this whole conversation is finding a balance in a number
Mhm.
of ways, and taking care of yourself to build that safety, to build that connection, and to model what it
Mhm.
takes to take care of yourself.
Right.
So, man, I just really appreciate you dropping in here, taking the time today. Is there any place where people can get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I am on Facebook. Jacob Abraham, I think, is what you'd find me under. Jacob, Jacob Abraham. I also have my personal training page, which is Abraham Solutions. I can't figure out how to change my. I had an apparel company, like a creative sort of endeavor that I was on. I called it Abraham Creations. I can't figure out how to change my Facebook name for whatever reason. So Abraham Solutions is probably the logo you'll be looking for. But Abraham Creation 716 is where I put all my, um, you know, health and wellness stuff.
Yep.
Again, it's just, if you're in the Randolph area and you want to do like a group fitness class, I'm running those twice a week through the month of May, and hopefully expanding that out. That's just another example of helping somebody learn how to care for themselves. Right? Is
Right.
a lot of people don't really know how to exercise. Like, man, exercise is so important. We all need it, and so those are the places you'd reach me.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Once again, thank you so much for your time and your energy and the work that you're doing in, my home county.
Yeah.
I really do truly appreciate you and what you're doing for the community there. So thank you for your time today, Jake. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate being on the podcast.